Hi everyone, and welcome back to Compare Art Supplies with Bats, Cats and Broomsticks. Today I wanted to compare some sketching pencils in cheap versus expensive. I'm going to be comparing Crawford and black sketching pencils in 4H to 6B as today's cheaper option. I bought these from the Works for only £3. And I'm going to be comparing these with the Derwent Graphics pencil set in 4H to 6B, which is my normal brand, but what I would prefer to use is the H to 9B set that they have also. Both of those sets are between £10 and £15 depending on where you buy them, so they are on the more expensive side. And I'm going to be swatching these out side by side so you can see the differences as I swatch through them, and then I'm going to do a little drawing with a side by side comparison. I'm going to open these tins up and we'll have a look and see what they're like. I'm going to start with the lightest, and I'm going to do it Crawford and black on the right side whilst I have the Derwent graphic pencils on the left, and we're going to start with our 4H pencil. First thing that I noticed swatching these pencils out was that it was extremely difficult to get the Crawford and black pencils to give me a really pale shade, even at 4H. I would expect a 4H pencil to be really very light, very delicate, and harder to push to a darker tone. So we've got the 4H in Derwent graphic pencils right next to it here, and we can see that the difference is a stark contrast, because I can barely get this pencil to pick up on camera. That's just how light and gentle you can make it go. So I'm shading over the top to give that nice even gradient, and as I do, I'm not seeing steps or stages in my lines, and when I blend them out, I'm not getting too much over smudging or greying out. And whilst I have the Crawford and black pencils on the other side, when I smudged them, it leaves that a really dirty effect on the paper that makes it look like you've done it by accident, and leaves all the scratchy, sketchy pencil marks in place. I'm really sorry about all the table shaking in this video. I hadn't realised when I was taking this video that it shook so much. Moving on, we are seeing the same like over shading from the Crawford and black pencils where they're really very dark. At 4H, 3H, I wouldn't expect to be able to get them to go that dark. They're almost like working with HB pencils all round. Then we've got the Derwent graphic pencils, and you can see the even stage step from the very first swatch that it is just a little bit darker, that you can see how it would be very easy to blend those into each other. Another thing I noticed is that the Crawford and black pencils here have a more blue cold tone to them, whilst the Derwent graphic pencils have a slightly warmer yellow tone to them. You can definitely see it in the blending out, especially. This one here is our 2H pencil, and I'm having the same trouble with the Crawford and black pencils, that they are really very difficult to have a gradient shading in them. It is very easy to go too dark and leave really very scratchy lines as you're working. While with the Derwent graphic pencils on the other side, I see just a really beautiful, soft gradient. I feel the need to say at this point that this is not advertised. These companies did not send these pencils to me. I'm just comparing what I used to use when I was in high school versus what I'd use now as a professional artist. When I was in high school, it was stressed on us to use a cheaper supply because we were still learning, but I feel like sometimes it's a little bit more important to learn with the good pencils, because you learn how to do it, how to get that shading better. Having said that, I do feel like there are things that the Crawford and Black pencils are perfect for. For example, if I was to go travelling, they would be what I would take with me, because I wouldn't want to take a £10 to £15 pencil set with me travelling abroad, where they might get lost, they might get stolen, or they might get damaged. So the Crawford and Black pencils would be perfect for that kind of thing, especially since you can create a pretty decent sketch with them and get your ideas down on paper, whilst personally I don't feel like they are a finished quality pencil, so you wouldn't want to make your final sketches for your major projects at university or at high school with these pencils, or if you were working with galleries. But that's just, from my opinion, from my perspective, as a traditional artist. Different kinds of artists might find that these £3 pencils are just fine for what they need. But personally, I find them really very difficult to shade out evenly. They leave really stage and stepped lines throughout your drawing, whilst the Derwent pencils are much softer. And there are definitely more expensive pencils than these Derwent graphic pencils that you could spend quite a lot of money on. So I feel like maybe they are a very decent quality mid-ranged pencil as opposed to expensive possibly. But from my point of view, as somebody who hasn't got a lot of money to spend on art supplies, they are up there with the more expensive brands. So moving forward down these shades, you can see more obviously that it is easier to blend and get even gradient from the Derwent graphic pencils, because you're starting to see like dots and darker marks in the Crawford and Black pencils that are very undesirable and cause edges to your sketch or to your drawing where you don't want them to be. Personally, I don't like the quality of the finish of the barrel of the Crawford and Black pencils, because I don't like the gloss finish to these pencils. It is something that I personally prefer my pencils not to have, a glossy finish like that. I prefer a more matte pencil, just because it's easier to move in your hand while you're drawing, because it doesn't grip and stick to your skin and make it difficult to move the pencil. Another note is that the Derwent graphic pencils here are really surprisingly very light. When I expect like high-priced, high-quality pencils, I expect them to be quite heavy, but these pencils are really very lightweight, and I feel like they would be easy to use for a long period of time, and they have the quality to back it up all the same. They all sharpen very nicely. I did sharpen them off screen because these are my pencil set, my go-to pencil set. I did sharpen them before I started this video. I feel like you get a more buttery texture from the Derwent graphic pencils than you do from the Crawford and Black pencils, almost as though the lead is much harder in the Crawford and Black pencils, and that's why it feels maybe a little bit more scratchy. And a little bit more rough and ready. Now, depending on what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to draw, that could be a desirable effect that you can use to your benefit, especially if you're a mixed media artist and what you want to create is something that looks maybe dystopian or really a charcoaly kind of effect. I think that it could be useful for something like that. We're starting to see the really deep shades in the Derwent and graphics pencils now, and we're starting to see the point where they start to shine back at me. We're starting to see the point where they shine back at the camera, so they're starting to leave a sort of glossy mirrored finish if you press really hard. Now that can be undesirable, but with a lot of graphic pencils or graphite pencils, that is unavoidable in the darker shades. Looking at these two side by side, it's really obvious to see how much easier it is to work the Derwent pencils from a very, very light tone to a very dark tone, but surprisingly, you do see a gradient in the Crawford and Black. It just starts at a much darker tone than the barrel of the pencil suggests that it's at, and goes further. So personally, I would have said that these pencils start at a HB and end at a 9B. That would be just my opinion. That if you treat them that way, it's much easier to use them, because you aren't expecting them to try and achieve something really, really very pale for you. So I'm just going to write down the center here what our pencils are, so that if you want to pause the video, you can tell which one's which, and you can have a think to yourself about what art you're trying to make and how they would work for you. You can see side by side which one's which. Just a little note before I move on to the drawing, I just wanted to get a close-up because I thought maybe you couldn't see quite clearly enough how light the Derwent pencils really go, and also what I meant by leaving scratchy marks from the Crawford and Black pencils. So I just did a zoom in really quickly here so that you could see what I meant and how light the tones are, just in case that wasn't 100% clear. So that's just my opinion for this video and how I feel about using these as an artist that works in a traditional medium. I prefer the Derwent graphic pencils, but that isn't to say that the Crawford and Black doesn't have good, decent qualities to it for other things. So I'm just going to divide this page down the middle, and I'm going to draw a little rose from a photo that I found. So let's get right into it. So that's it for today's video. I hope you really enjoyed this comparison video. If you liked it, please leave a like, leave a comment down below. I try to respond to everybody I can. Until next time.